guys, let's get into the look inside. We are going to start off with the Seattle Seahawks. Last year, 9-8. I believe they just missed the playoffs, if I have my math correct and I remember correctly. But 9-8, they did go ahead and replace Pete Carroll, though it was mutual. He moved to the front office. It is Mike McDonald, the former Baltimore defensive coordinator. New offense is going to be Ryan Grubb, who was the offensive coordinator for the University of Washington last year. And when I was doing the research, I don't think he has much, if any, pro experience. You're dealing with a completely college offense at this point. Projected starting offense, and this is using the underdog ADP as of this morning. Geno Smith going off the board as the QB 23 with Sam Howell backing him up. Kenneth Walker is the RB1. Zach Charbonnet is the RB2. Kenny McIntosh, no draft capital, but coming in as the RB3. DK Metcalf at wide receiver 1. Jackson Smith and Jigba coming in ahead of Tyler Lockett, which I think defeats a lot of the narratives that we're seeing out there, but they are wide receiver 47 and wide receiver 51. Jake Bobo and D. Eskridge bringing up the back end there at 4 and 5, with Noah Fant being the lone holdover tight end from last season. And so what we do is we break down 3 of these players. Chris, I'm going to get started with you because yours is probably the most interesting because I don't know which direction you're going to go with this. You wanted to talk Tyler Lockett. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, I wanted to talk Tyler Lockett because maybe I'm not understanding something. Like maybe something's just not clicking like up here. But why is it just the assumption that JSN is going to ascend into like this role that should make him flip Tyler Lockett? Like I understand the fact that he's now in his second season. It's supposed to be this better offense and all of that, but I mean, we're now projecting a role that JSN just didn't hold last year. Like when it came to 2 wide receiver sets, it was Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Both of them were out there for 100% of those. Well, not 100%, but they were out there running like most of the routes like for that. And actually, like when the team actually did move into like 2 wide receiver sets, JSN was out there on like 2% of the snaps, like for that, like 2% compared to what it was. Essentially like 24 and 25% like for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. We saw how little like JSN was used like once they got into the red zone. That has been primarily a DK Metcalf and or Lockett like type of role. And even when they were used downfield, I mean, that was still something that was those types of passes were spread across all 3 of them. So I get the general consternation like around Geno Smith. I know he's not like the coolest quarterback, and with what we saw last year, and especially the contract situation that Geno Smith is going through, I can understand like us being somewhat out on Geno, but being out on Tyler Lockett because I get the age factor, but how critical he has been to that offense, like from a first downs per route run standpoint, he blows DK Metcalf out of the water. JSN as well, for how useful he is like to that offense. Just summarily saying, well, because he's older and JSN is younger, I'm reducing the argument down into that. And projecting a better role for JSN just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So I'm looking at Fantasy Life projections powered by the brain of Dwayne McFarland, who has he has wonderful hair and an excellent brain. He's got him projected at over 850 yards. And right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, the line is set at 750. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the over on that. Minus injury. If we assume a full regular season for Tyler Lockett, I don't see how he crests that, like with how many targets he's had within an offense, which has been over 23% like for the past 3 or 4 seasons. That's with DK Metcalf in there. So I don't understand the hype around JSN, or at least the flippening that's happened between JSN and Tyler Lockett.
So I want to bring this up because Gator says dynasty heads are all in on JSN. And I think this might be the echo chamber that we're in because HoovTube, who just recently started working with Club Fantasy, adores JSN. And we've been hearing him pump him up for a while now. But then you see some of these deals for JSN, and I would say that they're not in on JSN, even in Dynasty. So my question to you is, Chris, I get everything you're saying about Lockett, and I do love Lockett, and I also have him projected for over 850 yards this year. But with this new college offense that seems to lean on 3 wide receivers, shouldn't we see more 3 wide receiver sets? And at some point, the young legs are likely to overtake Lockett. I guess my question to you is, we know where DK Metcalf's going to line up. How do you see the other 2 lining up in 3 wide receiver sets this year?
That'd be they could be interchangeable. And actually, last season, if I'm remembering correctly, Jackson Smith and Jigba, like he did get targeted more out of the slot. So and that's why we saw more of Tyler Lockett being the guy that was playing outside in 2 wide receiver sets. So you'd have DK Metcalf as your X, Tyler Lockett as your Z, and then they'd be able to operate from there. So if we can still see that interchangeability between for Tyler Lockett, where he can still play Z, still move into the slot at this point, and JSN is still developing, then that's where I'm just like, I don't see like where the additional utility comes for JSN to completely overtake Tyler Lockett. Now, if he does start to break down, if we do start to see like fewer routes for Tyler Lockett at where he's at, from a career standpoint, okay, I buy that argument, but at least we didn't see any of that last year, so I don't see why we just should expect that to happen in 2024.
Josh, are you of the like the thing? And Chris did not say this. Let me be clear. I'm not arguing with Chris, but a lot of the things I'm seeing, just want to say that I literally had someone say to me today, based off of a quote I had on JSN, that all the cards are against him having a year 2 breakout. 600 yards and 4 touchdowns is not awful. And we're going into a new wide open offense, Josh. So what are your takes on JSN versus Tyler Lockett heading into this? I don't want to call it really a crucial year 2, but for JSN, it could be make or break, at least in the minds of fantasy managers.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely that in the minds of dynasty managers, because they have literally zero patience. And they forget that sometimes it takes wide receivers 3, sometimes even 4 years to break out, and they can still be consistent thereafter. But, 600 yards, 4 touchdowns last year, JSN was perfectly fine for a rookie season, right? The thing that worries me a little when we're talking about Tyler Lockett, and it's not necessarily the fact that he's going to be 32 in September, it's that when you look at the number of yardage and the yards per reception over the last 3 years, it has steadily declined. So in 2021, it went from 1175, 16.1 yards per reception to 1,033, 12.3, all the way down to 894 and 11.3 last year. Now, Ryan, we talked before Chris even popped on the backside. Geno was awful last year. He was not good, right? But even like his 2022 breakout, Lockett was not as good as he was the year before with Russ, right? So are we starting to see that decline already, and we're just kind of ignoring it because JSN didn't light the world on fire last year? Now, I'm not of the mindset that Lockett just goes away, but I don't think that you spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver to not give him the chance by the second year to take that leap. And I think that, to me, is the biggest part of this equation that maybe some people aren't factoring in. I do disagree in the sense that the ADP is a little warped, and I think it's strictly because of who's doing best ball drafts right now. It's a bunch of dynasty degenerates, and they all love JSN, right? Yeah. They're the ones that are putting him above Tyler Lockett.
I was shocked.
So that's why the ADP is the way that it is. But once drafts really start kicking off the end of July and more into August, people are going to see JSN. They're going to see Tyler Lockett, and they're going to know the name Tyler Lockett before they know the name JSN. And they're going to be like, why is this guy getting faded? This is the guy that I want right now. So I don't necessarily think that Tyler Lockett takes a huge step back. Like the way that I did my projections, I only have him at like 96 targets, I think. And I JSN a little bit more than that. But I'm definitely leaving some wiggle room to kind of move that up or down, just kind of, seeing how OTAs and everything shake out. But to Chris's point, yes, I think JSN is much more of a slot receiver than Tyler Lockett is. Tyler Lockett knows how to work and operate on the outside. We really have not seen that from JSN, even going all the way back to his Ohio State days. He dominated out of the slot. But here's the thing. We see all the time wide receivers in the NFL dominate out of the slot. If that's how they want to use JSN, even when there's 2 wide receivers on the field, they can still have him operating out of the slot, and he can be really good. So I don't think that that's like it doesn't need to be a career death sentence for him, even in year 2. But there's wiggle room, and especially when you factor in if Ryan Grubb can come into the NFL and do and run the offense that he ran at Washington, they're going to be a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. It's going to be a lot of 11 personnel, and there's going to be plenty of routes run for all 3 of these guys. So really, we can sit here and say that both JSN and Tyler Lockett are a pretty damn good value.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find interesting about looking at them is they are only 4 wide receivers apart, but this is actually a gap looking at Fantasy Pros, but their numbers actually line up quite well with Underdog right now. JSN is the 47 on Fantasy Pros with the 79th overall pick. You drop to 51 for Tyler Lockett, but drop all the way to the 98th overall pick. 19 pick gap, which is almost a round and a half. And Chris, you use the term that they're interchangeable. And I find that interesting because in that case, though, I may like JSN better. Lockett is the better value. If these two guys have the exact same season, the fact that I got to wait a round and a half to grab Lockett in fantasy football where we're looking for value, that's going to benefit Lockett.
Yeah, and honestly, there's no. I would say that the way that they're valued right now is that there's risk for that to happen for the people that are into JSN. Whereas if JSN and Tyler Lockett kind of have the same season, you're basically buying Tyler Lockett like more or less at his floor. But let's say if JSN winds up having the same year as Tyler Lockett, we're probably buying him at his drafting him at his ceiling. And so I definitely agree with the idea of Grubb can come in, more 3 wide receiver sets. And really, if anything, the thing that I'm more concerned about is what their play volume is going to be at. Last season, the Seahawks were dead last in terms of plays per game. Washington Huskies last season, they were I think they were running like 66, 67 plays per game. Now, 67-ish like plays per game in the NFL, that's like breakneck pace. Like that's like Chiefs on freaking steroids. Oh yeah. But let's just say if they were moved to like league average, like type of play. So where essentially the Chiefs were at last year, I mean, you are talking like 3, 4, 5 more targets to spread across like the entire group, more plays for Kenneth Walker. I mean, just like the offense just has some more volume to it. So in that scenario, especially if they are running more 3 wide receiver sets, then the scenario then just becomes a bit more palatable, or like the idea becomes at least a bit more reasonable of both of them having similar seasons, where we know DK Metcalf will continue to be like the alpha of the group, sitting at a 24-25% target share. But then if JSN moves in, like kind of ascends to like a 17-18-ish% target share, and let's say Tyler Lockett takes a step back from 22-23% to 20-21%, then then now really it just comes down to just who catches more touchdowns.
Exactly.
And it's definitely possible, like given that type of scenario.
Well, and I like what you said. You said the Lockett, there's an affinity for Lockett in the red zone just with the Seattle Seahawks in general. So that could definitely shake his way in the red zone. Josh, we've been talking about the 2 and the 3 forever, but you want to talk about the 1. DK Metcalf currently going off the board as the wide receiver 20.
Yeah, I'm all in on Metcalf this year. I absolutely love the upside. This offense brings so much to love. I mean, if you need any evidence, Rome Odunze basically played the role that DK Metcalf's going to play in this offense. I mean, you can make the argument that DK is not near the route runner that, Lockett and maybe even to some degree JSN, but he's so big, he's so fast, he's so physical, he gets down the field. 3 out of the last 4 years, he's had over 1,000 receiving yards. Twice in his 5-year career, he's top 10 or more touchdowns. Like, he's going to be the alpha in this offense. Just like Chris said, he's going to have that 24-25% target share. And for a team that, in theory, is probably going to throw the ball 600 plus times, that's a lot of targets. And even at only a 60% catch rate, which for him is right about his career average, you're still looking at over 80 receptions. 3 out of those 5 years, he's been over 15 yards per reception. That is a lot of yards that he's going to be able to put up. And you cap into the fact that he has the upside of 10 plus touchdowns. That he's my wide receiver 10 going into this season right now. Whew. And you're getting him at wide receiver 20. That's a screaming value for me.
That's crazy high because I have him about where he's being drafted, which means this is the perfect time to play the game invented on Club Fantasy. Would you rather? Chris, I know you've played it with us before, but I will explain. I was going to say, I'm going to give you 2 options, and you just need to tell me which one you'd rather have. And Josh, I found it interesting that you gave your number that you have them all the way up to 10, because what's interesting is when I look at the receivers going ahead of DK Metcalf, I wildly prefer DK Metcalf. But when I look at the receivers going behind DK Metcalf, I'm not so sure. But I want to start with a name that I am notoriously down on because I don't know how much they're going to throw. Chris, DK
All right.
Metcalf or the wide receiver 24, Michael Pittman? Which would you rather have on your team?
Oh, DK Metcalf, easy. Michael
Yeah.
Pittman typically just plays in the intermediate parts of the field. Getting let's say a new quarterback, because they don't like him and Anthony Richardson only played for like 2 games last season. And Anthony Richardson is more of a mobile quarterback, so that's less volume for Michael Pittman. With now Josh Downs having a full season, we'll see like any of the hype that's coming around, like Jelani Woods, the TE that's the tight end that's kind of breaking out, and of course like Adonai Mitchell. So yeah, that's an easy call, DK Metcalf for sure.
Josh, I imagine it's easy for you as well.
DK, easy.
I think this one's easy as well, but the name is there, and I think that's going to be very interesting for drafters when August rolls around. Chris, Stephon Diggs or DK Metcalf?
Okay.
Complicated.
Because I'm of two minds about Diggs. I'll just say this. The analyst in me, the engineer in me, the analytically inclined person in me says that it should be DK Metcalf.
Okay.
But I'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Gosh, I can't imagine Diggs is ahead of Metcalf for you.
No, it's definitely Metcalf. But here's what I find interesting, right? Because both are in wide receiver rooms that have 3 really good wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
Which one out of those 2, Metcalf or Diggs, to you, Ryan, is the definitive wide receiver 1 on their respective team?
Oh, it's DK Metcalf. So
there you go. That's all you need to know.
Which brings me to the next guy, and the one that really made me have to start where I started. DJ Moore or DK Metcalf, Chris?
Give me DK Metcalf. I'll take DK Metcalf in that situation. Ryan Grubb, even like last season, I forget the name of the quarterback who was slinging the ball for. Oh my gosh, it was Penix. Yeah, duh. But Penix was like top 10 in terms of deep ball. Geno Smith, for all of his failures last season, was still graded out like fairly high on deep ball attempts, like from PFF. And DK Metcalf was also top 10 in attempts or passes thrown his way on 20+ air yards. So even if we don't get all the rest of the stuff that, all the other targets, because JSN's doing his thing, Tyler Lockett's doing his thing, I mean, the only other guy that's going to create those explosives is going to be DK Metcalf. So yeah, I'll still take DK Metcalf in that regard.
Josh, where do you stand with DJ Moore? Because Moore,
it's DK for me. It's DK for me, but I have DK at 10 and I have DJ Moore at 11. So it is.
Yeah.
Okay. So they are
just with Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback. Also, he's got like legit. I mean, Keenan Allen. I mean, in terms of being a legitimate target earner. I mean, that guy was. I know it was with Justin Herbert, and I know it was against like relatively lesser target competition in Josh Palmer, QJ, and like all those guys. But we're talking like
deserves the targets.
Yeah, I mean, he still deserves the freaking targets. I mean, the man was getting like 27-28% like targets per route run, and like whatever you think of like Roma Dunze. I mean, the dude's still like a first-round talent. I mean, he was the guy that was repeatedly in circles about like for wide receiver 1 contention. Yeah. I mean, it was Neighbors, it was Dunze, and it was Marvin Harrison. I mean, so
there might
it's
be
like
better competition in Chicago than we're really giving DJ
exactly.
Moore.
So it's just like there's these minor things that take away from DJ Moore, where it's like he has his breakout season last year, even with Justin Fields, a lesser quarterback than Caleb Williams. But now you tack on a rookie quarterback, you tack on a guy like Keenan Allen, like a veteran like him, you tack on first round talent like Roma Dunze. That's tough to at least compare to what DK Metcalf is working with.
And then the last guy is a guy who a lot of people have soured on, especially when essentially his heir apparent took over last year. Cooper Kupp or DK Metcalf, Chris?
It's still. I'll say DK Metcalf, but I can easily tell myself the story of Cooper Kupp when it was him healthy with Puka Nacua. I mean, they weren't too dissimilar in terms of opportunity. Puka Nacua was having a larger air yard share, but from a targets per route run standpoint, they weren't too far off. And the Rams have historically passed more often. So I could see a scenario where Cooper Kupp actually has he could have more targets, just more raw targets than DK Metcalf. But because DK Metcalf has the larger share of those targets, he might grade out as the better wide receiver. So I would say DK Metcalf, but I can see how it wouldn't be too terribly far, or like they wouldn't be too far apart by the end of the season.
And Josh, I imagine it's still DK Metcalf for you.
Correct.
So all I'll throw out there, I agree with everybody except for Kupp and DJ Moore. I have them ahead of DK Metcalf. But then when you look at the next like 10 guys, and I'm just going to tell you guys to go, we've spent way too much time on the Seahawks already. Go look this up. Kupp, DK Metcalf, and DJ Moore might be some of the best value in fantasy football right now because they are going behind receivers. They should not be. For me, I just wanted to talk Kenneth Walker really quickly. I feel like there is a narrative out there that he is going to lose this job to Zach Charbonnet, but that was the exact same narrative last year, and things were working against him last year with injuries. I don't see the job being handed off again this year. Walker handled 2/3 of carries. They split the passing work 50-50, which does cap Walker's ceiling a little bit. But guess what? Walker still handled 2/3 of the carries in the red zone and scored 7 of 8 of their rushing touchdowns inside of the red zone last year. I believe this is still Kenneth Walker's backfield. In today's NFL, your best bet might be to run Kenneth Walker into the ground and then get Zach Charbonnet on a cheaper contract on his second deal and then hand the offense off to him. I just don't see a big change happening in that offense this year. And we, of course, have our bets. Me and Josh both latched on to DK Metcalf. I say over 950 yards on FanDuel. That is -112. And Josh said most regular season receiving TDs plus 2,500 on DraftKings, appropriately named after DK Metcalf.